Good day, everyone. And today we're going to learn how to write linear equations in the slope-intercept form. First of all, let's recall that the graph of an equation in the slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. So given this information, we can use this to write equations of a line if you know just those two pieces of information. So let's begin by doing a couple of examples. So our very first example says write an equation of a line with a slope of -2 and a y-intercept of 3. So we know the form is y equals mx plus b. We know that m is equal to -2 because they told us the slope is -2. And we know the y-intercept is 3. So b equals 3. So all I need to do is go to my equation. I'm going to erase my m. And I'm going to put -2. I'm going to erase my b. And I'm going to put 3. Okay? Let's do another one that's that simple. Let's say that I want to write an equation that has a slope of 1/2 and a y-intercept of -4. So all I need to do is write my equation, y equals, instead of putting my m in, I'm going to go ahead and replace m with 1/2, and my b in this situation is a -4, but we don't write plus -4, we're going to make that -4. So this is the equation for a line that has a slope of 1/2 and a y-intercept of -4. Okay, let's proceed and go to writing an equation in the slope-intercept form that represents a line on this graph. So, looking at the graph, we need to identify two things. We need to identify our slope, and we need to identify our y-intercept. So I'm going to go ahead and do our y-intercept, since that's the easiest. Our y-intercept in this case is 3, so we know b is 3. And so let's find our slope. Our slope is a negative slope because we have a negative graph going down from left to right. So we know our slope is negative. Our rise is -2, and our run is 5 units. So our slope is -2/5. So we now can write the equation for this line. Y equals -2/5 x plus 3. Okay? So now we want to write an equation of a line that has no slope and a y-intercept of -4. Well, we know that lines that have no slope, our slope is equal to 0, and our y-intercept is equal to -4. So if we write our equation, y equals 0x minus 4. Now, 0 times any number is 0, so I don't really have to write this. So our equation is y equals -4. Okay? Let's look at our next problem. It says to write an equation that has an undefined slope. So undefined slope, and passes through the point -5, 2. Well, if you'll recall from one of our other videos, an undefined slope line is a line that is vertical. And we know that these graphs will always begin x equals, okay? And so in this case, we know that x equals -5. So our equation is x equals -5. And yes, I do understand that this does not look like the slope-intercept form, but it is the equation for this line. Our next problem, we are now going to deal with functions. So in this case, it says write an equation for a linear function f, which with the values of f of 0 equals 5 and f of 4 equals 17. Now, when we write these equations, when we talked about functions in our earlier videos, we know that f of x is just a fancy way to write y. Okay? So it's just a fancy way of writing y. So what we need to do in this case is that we're going to write our equation because they asked us to write it like a function. So our new equation, instead of y equals mx plus b, it's going to be f of x equals mx plus b because it's the function of x. Now, if you'll notice, this says the function of x. If I look at here and my original numbers, this is going to be my x, this is going to be my y. So when x is 0, y is 5. So I'm going to write that as an ordered pair, 0, 5. In this case, when x is 4, y is going to be 17. So this ordered pair is 4, 17. Now, we're not done. We've just identified the points. But in order to write an equation, we must know the slope and the y-intercept. Okay? So, if, first of all, we know that our y-intercept is where x is equal to 0, right? So in our first point right here, x is equal to 0, which means our b is going to be 5. Now, we can find our slope, as we learned in an earlier video. Our slope equation is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay? And if we remember, this is x1, our first x, and our first y. This is our second x and our second y. And so we now can find our slope and then write our equation. So I'm going to go ahead and go m equals 17 minus 5 over 4 minus 0, which is going to give me 12 over 4, which is equivalent to 3. So we know that our m is equal to 3. So we are now ready to write our function. F of x is equal to 3x plus 5. And you can check your answer if you'd like. If I put 0 in here, what's 3 times 0? 0, right? 0 plus 5 is 5, so there's my first point. Let's check it with our second point. What's 3 times 4? That's 12. 12 plus 5 gives me 17, so I have my ordered pair for 17. Okay? Now, let's look at a word problem where we're going to write a linear equation. A recording studio charges musicians an initial fee of $150 to record an album. Studio time costs an additional $55 per hour. Okay? Now that word per means multiplication. Okay? So if I'm a recording artist, when I step into a studio, no matter how much time I'm in there, I have to pay $150, no matter how much time I use. Okay? But after I start recording, I'm going to start paying $55 an hour. Okay? Now, we need to write. Our first question says, write an equation that gives the total cost of an album as a function of studio time. So we are looking for the total cost. I'm going to use C equals my total cost. Okay, and I'm going to use T for the time in the studio. And if you notice, I'm defining my variables so that people know what I'm using. So we're going to write an equation. We know that our cost has to equal, and we're going to put this in our mx plus b form. Okay, so in this case, my slope is going to be my $55 per hour, because that is what we're going to be doing. This is 55 times our time, so we have 55t, okay? And then we have to add, our initial fee is $150. So this is my y-intercept. That is where we start off our cost, is at $150. So we now have our equation in the slope-intercept form. We're not using y and x or m and b in this case. We're using c and t to represent our y and our x. Now, part B of this question says, find the total cost of recording an album that takes 10 hours to record. So we know that t equals 10. So we now need to substitute that into our equation. So C equals 55 times 10 plus $150. That is going to give me C equals 550 plus 150. So our total cost is going to be $700. So to record a 10-hour album, it's going to cost me $700. I thank you very much for watching my video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and have a great day.